Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming. My name is Frank Natale. I'm Executive Vice President of the Capital District Area Labor Federation, AFL-CIO. The Area Labor Federation represents 100,000 union members and their families throughout the greater capital region. On behalf of the Labor Federation, we would like to thank Congressman Paul Tonko for his steadfast leadership fighting against and opposing fast-tracking the Trans-Pacific Partnership Trade Agreement. We cannot talk about the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement without first talking about the North American Free Trade Agreement, or what is referred to as NAFTA. In 1994, the American people were promised that NAFTA would grow our economy, create 170,000 jobs per year, and lower our trade deficits with Canada and Mexico. 21 years later, under NAFTA, 1 million American jobs were lost due to offshoring, 60,000 manufacturing facilities were shuttered, and our combined trade deficit with Canada and Mexico increased 580%. The Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement is a massive trade deal and described by many as NAFTA on steroids. The TPP is currently being negotiated by President Obama along with 11 other Pacific Rim nations in secret. The TPP would involve 40% of the global economic activity and affect 800 million people. Little is known about the actual text of this secretive agreement, but what we do know is that this agreement has more to do with rewriting our domestic laws than general agreements on trade and tariffs. Lori Wallach from Public Citizens Global Trade Watch asserts that only 5 of the 24 chapters of the TPP concern actual trade issues. What makes matters worse is the method the President prefers to force Congress to approve the TPP, called fast-track authority. The U.S. Constitution provides Congress the exclusive authority to set the terms and conditions of transnational trade agreements. However, under fast-track, Congress would agree to relinquish its trade authority and turn it over to the President of the United States, thus allowing him to negotiate the TPP without any interference or input from Congress. In the process, Congress will have given away its authority to hold committee hearings, markups, or amend the TPP in the interest of the United States. Then, when the President decides to introduce TPP to Congress, U.S. representatives will only be allowed to vote yes or no for it, and within a very limited timetable. It is a take-it-or-leave-it proposition. Fast track doesn't sound like representational government to us. We have many concerns regarding the President's motives. We have to wonder why Congress is being asked to turn over its constitutional trade authority over to the President exclusively. The President claims the TPP will be good for America, then why the secrecy? Why is Congress being kept in the dark? Further, the terms of the TPP would rewrite our domestic laws behind Congress's back in the sole interest of foreign and transnational corporations, which will threaten our environmental protections, labor laws, consumer rights, and even buy American procurement preferences. This doesn't sound like a trade agreement that would benefit the people, create American jobs, grow our economy, and bring shared prosperity to America's working families. In our estimation, fast-tracking the TPP is an affront to our democracy and a threat to our sovereignty and security. The Capital District Area Labor Federation, AFL-CIO, is vehemently opposed to fast-tracking the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, and we call on Congress to reject its implementation. Again, we would like to thank Congressman Tonko for standing up and opposing fast-tracking the TPP. And we will continue to fully support Congressman Tonko until fast-tracking the TPP is permanently derailed. So thank you for that. And speaking of Congressman Paul Tonko, I would like to introduce our Congressman Paul Tonko.
Look, it's an honor to stand with our Bishop Emeritus Hubbard, who has always stood for economic and social justice, with all the leaders of labor and membership of labor that fights the good fight for working families of this country, and fill my voice with the soundness of what's fair and what's just as we continue to pursue policy at any level of government. But Frank has outlined very effectively the concerns about a fast-track situation. Look, Congress has its role to be a check and a balance. We have to make certain that we have the oversight authority and not circumvent Congress as fast-track would do. You know, there should be robust debate. There may be need for amendments. Those are denied with that simple thumbs up or thumbs down attitude on an agreement, on a negotiated agreement. And so there's very strong concern about fast track. Let me tell you, not only have I stood up to fast track, I've been part of a small group of us that has met weekly with labor and others. We have whipped our colleagues, searching them out, encouraging them to pay attention to this concept. We are working really hard to get them to say no to fast track. So it's a progressive, it's a very active effort being made by my colleagues, a few of us, and myself, to make certain that we can turn this decision in the right direction. Why do we get concerned about fast track? Well, as was made mention, the Trans-Pacific Partnership will address a huge block of the world economy, 40% of the global GDP. That's a very powerful impact. And so we have to make certain that this Trans-Pacific Partnership is done correctly. You know, people might say we're against trade. Absolutely not. We're for fair trade. This free trade concept doesn't serve anyone well. What do we have? We have loss of American jobs. That's painful in a very direct sense to our economy, to our future. But what are we doing to the world's workers? We're allowing for ripple effects to reach areas like Vietnam, where then the worker is asked to work for 56 cents an hour. So we're dumbing down the outcome for all the world's workers by allowing for this to happen. It's tainted with greed, in my opinion. It's people looking for a fast buck, a quick buck, an easy, loose buck that enables them to build their product. We should not hold out for that sort of outcome. We should fight against the efforts that many are making to rush this effort through. And my other point would be that these trade agreements are no longer simply about tariffs and trade barriers. I mean, the name would suggest that that's all that we cover with these negotiations and with these agreements. This fast-track concept, going back to the days of President Nixon, these outcomes have been very troublesome to the economy for a long time. They're not only addressing, as I said, those tariffs and trade barriers, they're addressing issues like the right to collectively bargain, labor concerns, labor fairness, food safety, making certain those standards are what they need to be, environmental protections, stewardship of various programs that are important, pharmaceutical drugs and their quality and their price tag. These are items that are snuck into agreements like this that have devastating outcomes for the great many of us in the America's middle class, and for the working poor, and for the poor. So there is a great momentum here for us to develop an opposition to fast track. Also, when we talk about these contracts, we've had an opportunity to interact with Administrator Fromer of the trade agency. It's so important to get answers on where we are on certain dynamics like currency manipulation. Currency manipulation is putting us at such risk. When you think about the auto industry, which is a large impact here of these trade contracts, you're given a $6,000 edge to our competitors. Where is our auto industry going to be when you're given a $6,000 blank check to go and purchase other than American? For every one American car that's imported out there, perhaps in Japan, 600 are exported. Or excuse me, 100. So that 100 to 1 ratio is a devastating thing, representing an area that was huge with traditional manufacturing, watching that impact that has taken hold, knowing that nationally the statistic is 1 of every 4 manufacturing jobs has been lost, and knowing that 3 out of every 5 manufacturing jobs that were lost ended up with those workers taking a pay cut when they found employment post that impact, and of those, 1 of every 3 is losing more than 20% in their salary. So these are devastating consequences. They're addressing issues that ought not be in an agreement, and they're covering 40% of the global GDP. For those reasons, there needs to be a robust debate on the House floor and in the U.S. Senate. There needs to be an opportunity to amend upward or downward, and there needs to be more than just a carte blanche approval. I will continue to work with my colleagues to connect to our members of the House, making certain they know fully well what happens when they give up this responsibility, and that we can do better than we've done. NAFTA should have taught us lessons. These Korean agreements should have taught us lessons. And again, so many of these nations are going to take advantage then of the American economy. But who gets hurt in the end? Totally the workers. So let's go forward. I thank everyone for sharing their voice in this exercise, and for in a very determined spirit coming forth to say no to fast track. Let's get it done right. Thank you so much.
Okay, so thank you, Congressman. We do have some speakers here. Our first speaker will be Bishop Howard Hubbard, if he could come to the podium.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm delighted to join with Congressman Tonko and with other advocates from labor and other people who are concerned about the rights of workers to talk about fast-track legislation, particularly the Trans-Pacific Partnership legislation that would include dozens of trade negotiations, including 11 deals in the Asian Pacific region and 28 in the European Union. A major concern is that congressional approval of fast-tracking authority, which would lead to straight up or down votes on an accelerated timetable, would have disastrous consequences for us in the United States. This legislation is being touted as a job creation measure. However, during this year, 21 years following the ratification of NAFTA, the pact between the United States, Mexico, and Canada, we are mindful that using fast-track authority has cost the United States nearly 700,000 jobs. Jobs have been shifted across borders, gutting the middle class, and for many families, turning the middle class dream into a living nightmare. And that is why the bishops in the United States, while not opposed to free trade as such, have consistently offered principles which should guide trade legislation. We have 8 basic principles. Let me just cite 3. The first is participation. It is critical that people have a voice in decisions that touch their lives. Human dignity demands transparency and the right of people to participate in decisions which will impact their lives. Participation has particular application to the negotiation of both trade promotion authority and agreements. They should be pursued in forms and through processes that will assure that the voices of those most affected can be heard and that their interests may be reflected in whatever agreements are made. Second, we insist that labor protections, including the right to organize as well as compliance with internationally agreed upon worker standards, be met. Our concern with job loss in our own urban and rural communities requires that any agreement be accompanied by firm commitments to help U.S. workers as well as the families and communities affected to cope with both the social and the financial strain of dislocation that free trade might bring about. Similarly, our concern extends to the human rights and the fair employment implications that our U.S. actions can have for people of other countries, especially of developing nations. And third, we question the merits of requiring sovereign parties to international treaties to agree to binding international arbitration as a forum for dispute resolution. Such a path may lead to unfair advantages for commercial interests willing to exploit the rules of the arbitration system, such as skirting the rules of the Dodd-Frank or comparable financial reform bills approved by other nations, and may result in the weakening of very important environmental, labor, and human rights standards. As pastors and teachers in a global church, our experience of the impact of trade and other aspects of economic integration, their perils and their possibilities, is both broad and deep. And therefore, unless these basic principles and concerns are addressed aggressively and constructively, we have to resist fast-track legislation. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop Hubbard. Our next speaker will be Legislative and Campaign Director from Citizens Action of New York, Jessica Wisniewski.
Thank you. Citizen Action of New York is a statewide membership organization that fights for social, racial, environmental, and economic justice. And I can't think of a better place to be than right here, right now, because stopping the fast track of TPP fits in all of those categories so well. We're also work on good government issues, and boy, this is bad process. When we elect Congressman Tonko, we want him in there, we want him representing all of us and doing what he does best.
Right,
and so we need that process to be open and transparent. We need to protect our environment, consumer safety, and most importantly, the rights of working families here at home and abroad. There are workers, low-wage workers, middle-class workers, fighting right now for wages to make ends meet, for the benefits that they deserve. We need good economy-boosting jobs from the ground up here in the United States, not a top-secret trade deal that devastates jobs here and abroad. So we thank Congressman Tonko and all of our labor partners, Citizen Action and our 20,000 members across the state, and our chapter here in the Capital District stands in strong support of stopping the fast track of TPP. Thank you so much.
Great, thank you. Our next speaker is Political Director of CWA 1118, Mike Carmel.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership has been referred to as NAFTA on steroids. And just like we oppose NAFTA, U.S. workers must stand up and stand with their elected officials, just as Congressman Tonko has, and impose fast-track authority for the TPP. Communications workers of America know that these global trade deals never benefit the U.S. worker. Since NAFTA, an estimated 1 million jobs have been lost to our neighboring countries. The permanent normal trade relations with China cost us 2.7 million U.S. jobs, and the Korean Free Trade Agreement still has failed to deliver the 70,000 jobs its brokers promised. The Economic Policy Institute estimates that if the TPP were allowed to pass, we would stand to lose more than 130,000 more jobs to Vietnam and Japan alone. And it's not just the loss of jobs, though. These trade agreements have also put a downward pressure on our wages and have exacerbated America's income gap, because under trade agreements like the TPP, American workers have to compete with their counterparts in Vietnam, let's say, where the minimum wage is just 56 cents an hour. And that's just the assault on the U.S. workforce. The TPP threatens internet freedoms and civil liberties, collective bargaining rights, public and environmental health, food safety, financial stability, and the American democracy. It's not been widely reported on. Please look into it. It's scary. For all these reasons, the CWA is proud to stand with Congressman Tonko and organizations like all these here today and oppose the fast track to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Our last speaker is Executive Director of the Labor Religion Coalition of New York State, Sarah Nicole Lady.
People of faith, community members, labor leaders throughout New York State on issues of economic and worker justice. I personally live in Montgomery County, a very rural area that's lost so many of its manufacturing jobs to companies overseas. And what I really want to know is, where's the fast track to my daughter's quality education? Where's the fast track to good jobs in my county? Where's the fast track to healthcare for all? These are things that we're not even talking about. And of course I don't believe that we need to fast track these things, or we should fast track these things. I believe in democracy. I believe we should have a voice. And the only reason the TPP is being discussed as a fast track measure at all is because the people don't have a voice. They don't have the voice they need in government. And I am so happy to see Congressman Tonko here representing us. This is something that we really need to understand the blessing of. We do have representation that does think about us, but we need to fight hard against this. The TPP is absolutely a measure that would promote and benefit big multinational corporations and hurt American workers. We need to stop it in its tracks. Thank you.
Okay, before we end, we're going to have a call to action, and we have a number that you can text right there that will put you in touch with your representative in Congress, and you can let them know that you oppose fast-tracking the TPP. So if you could do that now, that would be great. And so I'd like to thank everybody for coming out this afternoon, and especially we really like to thank Congressman Paul Tonko for his efforts in this issue. So.